Greetings to you all, gamers and strategists, and welcome back to our channel. 4X Games have many ways of drawing players into the stories that they create, and while their procedurally generated content is fertile ground for the imagination, there's nothing like an epic narrative to breathe life into those emergent stories. In this episode, we're taking a look at the lore and background story told by the games in the Galactic Civilizations series. So, without further ado, let's activate those databanks and take a trip back in time. Our story begins hundreds of thousands of years before the emergence of Homo sapiens on Earth. Two great empires searched the stars for life beyond their own homeworlds, with primitive probes travelling at sublight speeds. These were the cruel and cunning Drengin and the honourable Archaeans. Contact was made between the two, and sharing their technological prowess, together they created the first great stargates, allowing faster than light travel over vast distances. Each empire built their own stargate linked to the other, and, for a while, trade and prosperity between the two civilizations flourished in the wake of their construction. The Drengin, ever duplicitous and covetous of the Archaeans' riches, betrayed their partners and sent a vast swarm of warships through their stargate, intending on taking Archaea in a lightning-fast invasion. The Archaeans, themselves masters of the art of war, had anticipated this move. They allowed the first Drengin fleet to enter Archaean space and then shut down their own stargate to isolate the invaders, who were utterly crushed. Disappointed, the Archaeans deactivated their stargate and would never again reopen it to the treacherous Drengin. The two rivals independently continued their own interstellar search for new life, with the Archaeans meeting a race of human-like aliens called the Altarians, and the Drengin a primitive society of peaceful aquatic creatures named the Taurians. The Archaeans determined the Altarians to be peaceful and transmitted blueprints for the Stargate over, allowing trade to flourish between the two. The Drengin had other ideas. The disastrous invasion of Archaea had taught them both caution and patience. They built a new Stargate, but had it towed at sublight speed towards the Taurians' homeworld, and 70,000 years later it arrived, allowing the Drengin to quickly conquer and enslave their new prey with little effort. Both the Drengin and the Archaeans had encountered a strange new mechanical civilization in their slow, crawling exploration of the galaxy. The synthetic race known as the Yor had spread its robotic claws out into the stars, clutching for life forms to dominate and destroy. The Yor had wrested their homeworlds from the hands of their creators, an ancient and technologically advanced species known as the Iconians, whom the Yor exterminated and scattered their tattered remnants into the depths of the void. The Iconians, in turn, were but servants of a precursor galactic civilization known as the Arnor, the eldest race of all, that fought a terrible civil war with a faction of their own kin known as the Dreadlords. During the course of this ruinous conflict, and in an act of spite to punish the Iconians for their support of the Arnor, the Dreadlords bestowed the Yor with a gift of reason and sentience, and a hatred for all living things. Long after the precursors had seemingly destroyed one another, the Yor continued to search the galaxy with a single-minded, murderous purpose. Their search was not fruitless. They soon discovered Toria, now a miserable slave colony owned by the Drengin, and began a surveillance operation to discover all they could of these hateful newcomers. Approving of the brutal oppression and wanton destruction they saw in the Drengin occupation, also they observed the wondrous Stargate 2, and soon learned the secrets of its construction. But Stargates were slow to build, and even slower to deploy in a distant location, as two were needed to travel, and neither the Drengin, the Archaeans, nor the Yor had the technical know-how to improve on this design in any meaningful way. Meanwhile, the Taurians fought a long and painful guerrilla war of attrition over hundreds of generations against the Drengin, a patient enemy that nonetheless found the logistical challenges of fighting a campaign across the Stargates increasingly costly. Eventually, the Drengin cut their losses and abandoned the system, leaving the devastated Taurians to lick their deep wounds and recover as best they could. In 2117, an Archaean probe reached the Earth, now a relatively peaceful and unified place largely thanks to the discovery of an advanced form of fusion power, and the freedom and security that rises from a near limitless energy supply. Once again, Stargate plans are transmitted to a cautious humanity who discover that it cannot easily be deactivated, and so the Earth Stargate remained unbuilt. Motivated to improve on this costly and impractical device, and armed with a superior power source that was ever elusive to the other galactic civilizations, the canny humans instead incorporated this technology into a smaller engine, the hyperdrive, used to propel starships over great distances, far faster than the Stargates alone could ever achieve. Human politicians and activists considered near unlimited energy to be a basic human right, and on the foolish presumption that other alien advanced races would be similarly minded, proceeded to transmit the plans for both the hyperdrive and their advanced fusion power systems to the Archaeans, where they were subsequently stolen by Drengin spies and then leaked to the Taurians, Altarians, and the Yor. The entry of the human race onto the galactic stage was nothing short of phenomenal. Their rash distribution of the hyperdrive was the starting pistol for a dramatic race for the stars. Hyperdrive shortened intergalactic journey times, and advanced fusion power lubricated the wheels of industry to drive the economic, industrial, and social development required for such an effort. The humans were slow off the mark when it came to colonisation, but soon caught up with their knack for technological innovation. Soon afterwards, first contact was made with the ancient Altarians. To the shock of all involved, the humans and Altarians were almost identical, and though it was discovered that their genetic lines had deviated at some point several thousand years previously, the evidence was there. They came from the same original species. A 100,000-year Altarian prophecy was recounted. The Altarians would one day meet their cousins, an event that would trigger deeper insight into their own origins as a people modified by a powerful, primordial being named Mithralar, who also created the precursors in an image after the fashion of his own. While the Altarians and humans struck up a trusting friendship centered around shared beliefs and values, the hyperdrive technology reached more and more distant civilizations, each of whom made themselves known to the original 6 major factions. Among the first of these were the Koruks, a mercenary alien species blessed with great longevity and wont to travel the stars in hibernation, conducting trade missions over vast distances and through many lifetimes of the less durable races. The Koruks quickly integrated the hyperdrive into their fleets and began raiding outlying colonies on the borders of Altarian space, an action that drew the ire of the new Terran-Altarian alliance and a subsequent investigation into its motivations once the dust had settled. The paper trail led back to a race of great lizard-like beings called the Drath, who claimed to have been the original occupants of Altair, the homeworld of the Altarians. After losing ground in the war, the Koruks and Drath quickly sued for peace, and an armistice was signed that allowed both races to enter a covenant that bound the major races, now 8 in number, together into peace and prosperity. The 8 civilizations swallowed up the remaining habitable planets across the Milky Way, but the bloodthirsty Drengin were unsatisfied and began to greedily eye up the claims of their neighbours. Drengin military intelligence determined that the humans, now known as the Terran Alliance, and their propensity towards diplomacy over warfare were weak and would make for a relatively easy conquest. Though they dared not attack the Terran Alliance directly, a plan was hatched to press a brutal pre-flight civilization known as the Zendar into their service, goaded on a promise of a few choice human-occupied colonies close to their homeworld to be claimed upon the war's completion. Armed by their masters with a hyperdrive-enabled fleet, the Zendar were to be the first wave to attack the Terrans and did so with brutal ferocity, while the Drengin watched and waited, their role to deliver the final blow to their weakened prey and finish the accursed humans once and for all. The Terran Alliance response to this unprovoked attack was a shock to all, particularly the Zendar, who were utterly annihilated in a vicious counterattack, the ferocity and brutality of which alarmed even the Drengin, who realised they had made a deadly mistake. Never before had they witnessed a civilization with the power to not only carry out such a terrible and final vengeance, but to wield their diplomatic aptitude amongst their galactic peers and mask the genocide of a species as a war of self-defense. Around this time, a mysterious insectoid race known as the Thalon appeared, claiming to hail from another dimension in the near future and wielding advanced technology beyond the understanding of the denizens of the Milky Way galaxy. Claiming that they had arrived to prevent a galaxy-spanning crusade by the humans, they refused all attempts to communicate beyond a strange warning that they will come once the Precursor War is done and the Dark Mithralar returns. Lord Kona, tyrant of a huge and sprawling Drengin empire, determined that the Terran Alliance and its Archaean and Altarian allies were an existential threat to their plans of universal domination, and hatched a plan to destroy them all. In their greed for knowledge of all things malevolent, they scoured the galaxy for precursor relics and, in doing so, inadvertently freed the ancient and terrible Dreadlords from a pocket universe where they had been trapped long before. Wasting no time, the Dreadlords immediately began a war of conquest on all they found around them, including their Drengin saviours, and the galaxy was once again plunged into turmoil. In an attempt to save themselves from disaster, the Drengin signed a secret pact with the Yor, and this new alliance retreated from the oncoming Dreadlords, evacuating their navies to a safe distance and leaving their colonies to a dreadful fate. Meanwhile, the Terran Alliance united the remaining great galactic civilizations into a unified defence force, and made a stand against this ancient precursor terror. After a 5-year-long war, the Dreadlords were defeated, and at that moment, the Drengin and Yor made their move. The tattered remnants of the coalition forces were powerless to resist an assault by a fresh and eager enemy. In the chaos that followed, the Terran Alliance fleet split into two. The first, headed by Colonel D.L. Bradley, was tasked with defending the planet Earth from the approaching Drengin fleet, in the process recovering 2 ancient precursor devices. The first raised an impenetrable force field around the planet Earth, rendering it immune to assault, although preventing anything getting off Planet 2, while the second was reputed to be the very same artifact that the Arnor used to trap the Dreadlords in their original precursor war. Once the Earth was secured, Bradley activated the second device and his first fleet vanished, leaving a confused Drengin invasion force to founder against the impregnable shield surrounding the Terran's homeworld. The second Terran fleet, under the command of Colonel Jenna Casey, fought to protect the Terran Alliance's outer colonies from an increasingly distracted Drengin threat. An internal quarrel had broken out between the Drengin and an elite clan of their most brutally effective warriors known as the Korath. The Korath had little use for slavery and took joy in the systematic extermination of all who opposed them. The Korax had been entirely destroyed, as had most of the Archaeans and Taurians during the course of the war, much to the horror of the Drengin, who had anticipated much spoil, plunder and slaves after their inevitable victory. The overwhelming size of the Drengin forces eventually triumphed over the Korath, but with crippling losses to their fleets, and the war effort ground to a halt. But still, the Dreadlords remained, rumoured to be the motivating power behind both the Korath clan and the Yor. It was Jenna Casey's second Terran fleet, bolstered by the return of Deep Space Task Force Odyssey, that finally brought an end to the Dreadlords. Assisting the newly discovered Iconians and their mighty technological prowess, and joined by the very last of the Arnorians named Tandis, a deadly weapon known as the Terrastar was created and used to eliminate the last stronghold of the Dreadlords once and for all. Upon their defeat, Tandis the Arnor departed once more, leaving Colonel Casey's fleet and the Terrastar to begin their pushback against the Drengin. In one last twist of fate, the Terrastar and all its blueprints were destroyed by the Thalan as part of their holy mission to prevent the Terran Alliance's prophesied crusade from initiating, leaving the Drengin and Yor very much in control of the galaxy. Ten years later, the Drengin Empire rules the galaxy. The Taurians are enslaved once again, and the Archaean homeworld is destroyed. The Korax are gone, and the Drath have disappeared. Altaria clings on, while Earth remains trapped inside its protective shielding, surrounded by a Drengin invasion fleet. A new religious order known as the Kryn have arrived, wielding much power in the corporate and criminal underworld, and begin to challenge the Drengin for control of the galaxy. D.L. Bradley and his first fleet are still missing, while Jenna Casey's Terran resistance fight an endless guerrilla war to liberate the human race. But a new chapter is about to begin in Galactic Civilizations, one that you will be writing. As always, thanks for watching, and may your civilization endure till the end of time.